Something big is on the horizon. And remember, I'll be watching.
Hello world! Curses of madness be upon you all for life fighters. Something big is on the horizon. As I'm sure many of you have noticed by now, the Apex Legends comic chapters have had a bit of a running theme so far throughout Season 6, in that the title of each chapter is counting us down from 7 to 1, rolling 7s in love, 6 stitches, etc., with the next chapter to release at this point being the third wheel. So my question is, what happens when we reach the end of the countdown? Oh, well, there you go. Mystery solved. Bye. It's never that simple with me. While the rocket is the most likely candidate, I think there's another location that could see a change at the end of the countdown, and I'd like to actually sort of theorise on what those changes could be as well. So just to really point out why I'm unsure if it is launch site that will see changes, and sort of why I'm making this video in the first place, the other point of interest I'm going to be looking at today is, annoyingly, just called Countdown. Thanks Respawn, like, by not being subtle at all, you've still managed to be misleading, which is actually pretty good. Fair enough. From there, right, the basis should be pretty easy though. There's 2 places on the map that can logically see some kind of impact from the comic Countdown. Now we just have to look at what those could be. Like, obviously the rocket is going to take off, but when and for where, and, you know, what the hell could even actually happen at Countdown. Let's start with launch site, as personally it's got way more evidence to look at that could give us some indication of the future plans for it. And before we even look at the Destination Unknown loading screen by Crypto, one thing immediately jumps out at me about this rocket. They don't need it. Like, at least for interplanetary travel they don't, anyway. Season 3 confirmed that that's pretty easy for the games to accommodate, and the supposed ongoing use of both King's Canyon and World's Edge suggests that the games aren't confined to one planet at any time by any means. And even if they did need this rocket for interplanetary transportation, why would they use such an old-ass design? Like, the Goblin dropships would likely even suffice for such travel, and if the rocket was heading, say, for the regularly teased Olympus, there's no seeming need for special, or what looks like ancient, space travel by comparison to what they have now. Several of the cast are from Samathi itself, with Loba having travelled from there only recently. It's not far enough away to need anything special, and again, this rocket looks kind of old compared to the tech that they have. And the rocket itself isn't even exactly safe in a Bloodsport arena either. It's pretty weird that it's there, right? Crypto also points out in Destination Unknown that he knows where it's heading, like it's in the ship's manifest, but he says that the chosen location can't be right. This suggests that it's heading for a place that we probably know of, as revealing an unfamiliar name would just leave us in the same position of knowing basically nothing, so that's why they've hidden the name. And the fact that he says it can't be right, that can, you know, have a number of suggestions that it's going to a place that he didn't expect, or that it's aiming to do something that he doesn't expect. But still, we don't really know anything about it at this point. He hasn't given us enough evidence. However, there potentially is a familiar name in this excerpt, so we don't know what planet that the ship's going to, but there is something that we can recognise in here, I think. The authorization code, BRANT P2 or PII, definitely leads me to think of all roads lead to Branthium, which could tie this rocket into the codes that Hammond recently stole from Ash. She's heavily linked to both Olympus and Branthium, and Branthium, by comparison to Olympus at least, seems to be far closer to a concept or an idea or an aim or a goal than a physical place. Just given the nature of the quote, like, which has a much more symbolic meaning than a tangible one, given like the modern iteration of all roads lead to Rome, sort of where this phrase may have come from, as in that iteration it sort of means that all actions will lead to one outcome. It's almost saying that, like, this is certain, or everything that is going on is leading to one aim. But what that aim is, what Branthium is still very much up in the air, and there's no explicit reference to it here. We just have BRANT PII. So how about Arcadia, the name of the shuttle? Arcadia is a Greek word, and it refers to a vision of pastoralism and harmony with nature, and it has become a poetic byword for an idyllic vision of unspoiled wilderness and natural beauty. Although commonly thought of as being in line with utopian ideals, Arcadia differs from that tradition in that it is more often specifically regarded as unattainable. Furthermore, it is seen as a lost Edenic form of life, contrasting to the progressive nature of utopian desires. So what does that sort of mean? The idea of an Arcadian utopia would be one that goes back to the roots of humanity, unspoiled wilderness and natural beauty, living off the land, exactly sort of how we were initially in our early history, to an extent. This idea at least seems to fit the ideology of the clan that raised Bloodhound, but is very obviously at odds with the actions of Hammond themselves. So why would Hammond sort of take up this sort of utopian fixing nature, going back to basics idea? Why would they use that as the name of a rocket? To me, that suggests an attempt to repair or mitigate the damage they've done to Talos. Like, if you look outside World's Edge, most of the planet is lava. And the planet harvester is literally harvesting the planet from its core. It's destabilizing the planet to an extent. If the rocket were aimed at Talos to do something, or if it was going into Talos' atmosphere to do something, that would tie to Crypto's confusion, as the rocket would be targeting the planet it's taking off from. So that would at least explain that confusion. But what would it do in that case? Like, what exactly would it be doing if it were aimed at Talos, right? My personal idea is, especially based on the ice that seems to be encrusting the rocket, my idea is that the rocket itself isn't transporting anyone anywhere. The scientific materials on board are the components for a cryogenic bomb of sorts, based on the technology that felled Epicenter, aiming to either cool the planet or its atmosphere so as to stabilize it, to harvest it for longer so it doesn't break apart at the seams, right? Or simply to create new bedrocks, new habitable land on World's Edge by freezing over some of the lava plains. This would fit the Arcadia idea to extents. Obviously, it's very metaphorical, right? But it also fits the idea of being something big on the horizon that Blisk speaks of, which is evidently tying into the rocket directly by how this shot is done and how he speaks at the time, yeah? And my idea there is that it ultimately would result in a significant extra map update for World's Edge, expanding the map outwards at a certain point by freezing a bunch of lava into an ice field, something like that anyway. Or it could make us an entire new map set somewhere just entirely elsewhere on Talos. Like in the big lava field, there's just suddenly an entire new landmass for us to play with. And that's my basic idea anyway, right? With Ash seemingly on her way to meet Blisk, his hint of the horizon, right, could even be coming up by the time we finish this comic's arc, by the time we hit the end of the countdown. So what's my issue? The rocket, to me, feels like it would be used at the end of a season to lead into like a new season and a new map, or some new big change. With the pacing and length of the comic as it stands, this would then happen mid-season instead, and we wouldn't really have had a lot of time to develop Ash and Blisk before something huge with the rocket happens. All of that sort of contributes to me suspecting that Countdown, the other point of interest, is in fact where the first change will happen instead. Described as another Hammond facility with a mysterious purpose, Countdown has been built over what used to be drill site, with some remnants of their digging evident in the honeypot loot bunker in the middle. The place itself has no clear link to a Countdown besides its name, I can't see it anyway, and it has no real obvious function for us to build on. It's just, it's just a big open space, right? However, that big open center space could be used to house a number of things, like for instance a supply ship, or even the Mirage Voyage, even though that wouldn't have moved it very far. A Countdown, as the name suggests, could then lead to it travelling across the map, or disappearing, or spawning gun turrets or something mad, any number of various behaviours depending on what ends up being put there. So to me, Countdown is a much easier space to introduce smaller changes with, as would fit from a sort of a mid-season update and just moving the Mirage Voyage, for instance, yeah? And I believe ultimately it could fit better to show a more personal shift between Ash and Blisk than a bigger plot-driven change as with the rocket, so it fits more to the sort of timing of the comic that we have. So my theory, as wild as it'll seem, is that Blisk will bring Ash back into his fold, gift her Viper's rebuilt Titan, and make Countdown the launch site within matches for a roaming Titan mini-boss. Yes, that's pretty mad. I know it's probably not going to happen. Like, it sort of prevents Ash from becoming a legend. Like, being a legend is a much more interesting dilemma for Blisk to put Ash in. So as much as I think that a Titan PvE element would add a lot of, like, fun novelty to the game, kinda cuts Ash's story maybe a little short or removes some of the more immediate possibilities for her, and it could just harm the competitive integrity of the game in many ways as well. So, which location do you think the countdown's leading to, and what will happen there? Like, those are my two wild ideas of a Cryo-Bomb making new land on Talos, and Ash getting a flying Titan to fight us with every match. Like, the rocket just going to Samathi is way too boring and kind of obvious for me, unless it's able to spark further stories just by being that mode of transport for them. But that's all the ideas that I have for today. And it shouldn't be too long before we get to find out whether I'm talking out my arse or not anyway, right? Either way, thanks for staying with me, friends. I hope you enjoyed my silly ramblings on this countdown theory. Please do all the YouTube things, as it really helps out tiny channels like this one, and hopefully I'll see you again very soon. With that, I've been Euclidean Vision, the emotional support. Take care of yourselves out there, teammates, and may the glorious light of Best Girl shine within you. Bye-bye.
Ooh.